Hi, I'm Chandler Morse, Vice President for Public Policy here at Workday. I lead Workday's corporate affairs function and manage all aspects of our global public engagement. Today, we're going to talk about the rapidly evolving policy landscape focused on AI, and rapidly evolving it is. With more than 2 decades of public policy experience, I've never seen an issue capture the focus of so many policymakers at so many levels, all at the same time. And having spent the better part of my career on Capitol Hill working on policies impacting entry-level and frontline workers, many of whom could benefit from AI and workforce-focused data-driven insights, this feels very much like the right policy issue to be pouring our attention into. As a bona fide policy nerd, I'm happier than a camel on hump day. Today, we're going to learn the factors driving the widespread interest in AI regulation among policymakers, the building blocks for smart AI regulatory safeguards, why balancing innovation and regulation is crucial, and why effective legislation should adopt a risk-based approach, and finally, where Europe, the US, and the Asia-Pacific regions are headed when it comes to AI policy. Let's start by talking about what's driving the attention in capitals around the world. While the AI policy conversations going on in global legislatures vary in both their maturity and their objectives, there's a striking alignment on a handful of factors that are driving the focus, including policymakers witnessing AI's expanding scope. There's a growing realization that AI will touch our lives in many important ways, and there's a consistent focus on decision-making in particularly impactful areas like HR and employment, as well as healthcare, financial services, and other areas. Policymakers are also seeing a desire for AI adoption across the world's economy. In a global survey we conducted last year, 80% of business leaders agreed that AI is a must to keeping their businesses competitive, and 83% expected their level of investment in AI to stay at the same level or increase this year. And policymakers are hearing widespread concern and seeing an overall lack of trust. In a global review of AI trust we published this year, 62% of leaders indicated they welcome AI, while only slightly more than half of their employees do. And only 55% of employees suggested they were confident that AI would be implemented in a trustworthy manner. Policymakers definitely see the potential benefits of AI, but they're also super cognizant of the persistent worry of unintended consequences. And lastly, many fear they will miss the moment. There's a sense among many lawmakers that public policy lagged too far behind technologies like social media, and playing catch-up in the policy arena has been challenging. In many ways, the fact that the AI policy conversation is happening at the same time as the race to adopt AI is something we have never seen before. Though in other ways we'll touch on, AI is following a well-worn path set by the development of privacy regulations. While there's a growing recognition of the potential benefits of AI, there's also a growing recognition of the potential for unintended consequences. Companies like Workday are increasingly taking steps to ensure their AI is developed and deployed in a responsible manner. In fact, we've also partnered with industry leaders like Indeed and ADP to promote industry best practices. However, there is a level of confidence that can only be gained with regulation. All too often, unfortunately, and particularly when it comes to technology, regulation and innovation are seen as a zero-sum choice, with one coming at the expense of the other. There's an inherent tension between the need to safeguard people against AI's risks and the eagerness for industry to bring AI-enhanced innovations to the market. Given the necessity of trust to even support a market for which to innovate, in the case of AI, it isn't innovation or regulation, it's innovation through regulation. Smart AI safeguards that build trust while supporting innovation are essential. With the policy landscape evolving quickly, let's take a look at what some of the building blocks that policy proposals that would build trust in AI need to include. Legislation creating smart AI guardrails will need to include several key aspects like focusing on what's important when it comes to risk. Not all AI use cases are created equally when it comes to risk. The Netflix algorithm that suggests I might like Downton Abbey because I watched Peaky Blinders, which, for the record, I like them both, doesn't deserve the same level of scrutiny that, say, an anomaly detection software package that's reviewing my chest x-ray. Any workable framework for regulating AI has to be risk-based and take into account both the types of decisions to cover as well as the level of automation involved in the decision-making. We also need to ensure that responsibilities are aligned to the appropriate roles in the AI value chain. There are steps that developers like Workday should have to take, as well as requirements that only AI deployers will be able to accomplish. Policymakers should leverage both existing and enforceable accountability tools. For example, impact assessments are a tried and true tool used in privacy and cybersecurity. And given that AI standards are nascent, talk of mandatory third-party auditing requirements is premature. Lastly, given the global conversation on AI regulation, we all need to work to support at least some level of international harmonization. With these building blocks as our policy North Star, crafting sound policy also demands rolling up our sleeves with a bias for action, partnering with lawmakers who recognize that the time to act is now, and bridging between those that believe any regulation is bad regulation on one side and those that think any AI is bad AI on the other, with the goal of paving a path in the near term through the middle in order for the benefits of AI to be safely realized. So, in all this rapid evolution, what is the policy roadmap currently? Where are we now? And more importantly, where are we going? Like with privacy, the EU is leading the pack. The EU AI Act was passed this March and will be implemented over the next 2 years. Recognizing the importance of getting the nuanced, risk-based approach right, we have been engaging with European lawmakers since 2019. We think the Act landed in a positive place with economy-wide, workable, risk-based requirements that will help build trust, which is good because it represents a very meaningful first step in global AI regulatory policy. The UK, having left the EU, is considering a more sectoral and hands-off approach and is largely just getting started. At the same time, we've seen halting progress at the federal level in the US. There's a lot of attention among members of Congress and a recognition of the need to be thoughtful, given the potential economic and geopolitical issues. But most believe meaningful AI legislation coming out of Capitol Hill is far off. And having spent 13 and a half years working in congressional offices, I've earned the right to throw a rock or two from time to time, and I have to say that this is, particularly for tech policy, completely on brand for Congress. Toward the goal of having something to harmonize with as the EU was moving forward, Workday leaned in as an early champion of the NIST AI risk management framework. NIST, famed for its collaborative approach, put together a useful, though voluntary, cookbook for managing AI risk that many companies have taken off the shelf and are using. Much of the action in the US has been at the state level, however. In many ways, we've seen this movie before with privacy. The EU acts, Congress falters, and the states fill the role, though in this case, it's actually happening even faster. There are reports that last year saw a 440% increase in AI-related activity in state capitals across the country, and that more than 600 AI bills were introduced at the state level this year. Our focus has been on key states in the tech policy arena, including California, Washington, New York, and Connecticut. For example, California was a first mover on state privacy and is expected to lead the pack on AI policy, given it's the home of Silicon Valley. We have been engaging early at the state level, recognizing that we're unlikely to see 50 separate state approaches and expect early alignment on a few key bills that ultimately get passed and are replicated across the country. Similar to what we saw with the state privacy legislation. While the EU and US are following the privacy scripts, we are seeing countries in the Asia-Pacific region seek to play an interesting role. In many ways, countries like Japan, Singapore, and Australia are looking to manage risk by leveraging their existing tools while also recognizing the economic benefits that could come from AI. In addition, we've seen regional and multilateral efforts like the release of the ASEAN Guide for Ethical AI, and Japan take a leadership role in crafting the OECD's generative AI principles. In closing, to keep with the global AI policy landscape theme with an analogy from the world's most popular sport, if AI policy were a soccer match, I think we would be the better part of the way through the first half. Progress has been made, ideas are gelling, and more action is anticipated. How this particular match plays out will have rippling effects across more than just the tech sector. We'll see impacts globally and economy-wide, as well as on our workmates, our customers, and in all our daily lives. With different stakeholders bringing unique perspectives, public policy benefits from broad engagement, and we encourage everyone to engage now.